Welcome to Arizona. We're in Scottsdale this week and we have a very exciting week ahead of us. The weather is 90 degrees and sunny, and I have a ton of cute cafes and shops bookmarked. But most importantly, we are reading Barbara Kingsolver. So The Bean Trees is actually Barbara Kingsolver's debut novel back in 1988, 37 years ago. I've only discovered her work recently, but I know that she carries many accolades as an author. I read Demon Copperhead and it was absolutely phenomenal, so I'm interested to see how her earlier works stack up. So The Bean Trees is about a young girl who grows up in poverty in rural Kentucky, and her only goal is to escape. She heads west with an old car and no plans, but runs into a few challenges along the way that totally divert her course. It is said to be heartfelt and hopeful. A lot of the reviews praise the authentic characters, which is not surprising at all if you've read any Kingsolver. The writing is also complimented for portraying a very vivid atmosphere, which is perfect because we're here in Arizona to read this. We're staying at a resort in Scottsdale, and this property is absolutely gorgeous. It's like the quintessential Arizona landscape with Camelback Mountain in the distance and just like tons of cacti and palm trees. So definitely a change of scenery from Minnesota. There are tons of cool seating areas around the property, so I think I'm gonna try to scope out a good reading spot and dive in. Okay, it was getting a little warm, so I came back to the bungalow. I've read about 50 pages, and I am already hooked. The story is told in first person from Marietta's point of view, and even within the first 50 pages, you can just see her mature and outgrow her Kentucky roots. She saves up to buy this barely functional car, and as soon as she gets the keys, she is heading west. She has absolutely no plan and just is going to put down roots wherever she ends up. She changes her name to Taylor after stopping for gas in a town called Taylorsville, and she keeps driving, but her carefree plans kind of come to a halt when she has some car troubles, stops on this Native American reservation, and as she's packing up to leave, this woman walks up to her door and places a baby in the back seat. And at first, she tries to reason with this woman, but the woman was having none of it, and eventually she just ends up driving off with the baby. She's kind of in shock, I mean, rightfully so, but as more details come to light, she decides that it's probably better off if she just adopts this child. So it's kind of ironic because in efforts of escaping her Kentucky roots, avoiding teen pregnancy, and escaping poverty, she has essentially put herself back in the same situation. It's just a very interesting start to the story. The writing is very straightforward and just very human, so I am definitely invested. I have a little more time to read this morning, but like I said, it's kind of warm out, so we're gonna stay inside for a little bit. Luckily, this room is super cute. This hotel is like mid-century modern inspired, and there's just tons of cool, playful designs, amazing art on the walls that they actually sourced from local artists, so that is just a cool little touch. So let's do a little room tour and then continue reading. Okay, we're about halfway through the book, and the pace has slowed a little bit, but we're settling in. One of the major themes of this book is found family. She makes fast friends and even ends up roommates with a fellow Kentucky native. Everyone she meets has their own unique story, and I think the author did a great job at creating these complementary characters to help tell Taylor's story and just broaden her innocent horizon. It opens up the conversation to some bigger issues like immigration and just basic human rights. I'm gonna take a little break from reading. There's a local bookstore that I want to check out over in Old Town. I've been in the mood for a fun fall romance, so we're gonna go see what we can find. Okay, we made it back to the hotel. We had a great afternoon just exploring all of the shops in Old Town Scottsdale. We stopped by a bookstore called The Poison Pen, and they had a good variety of everything from romance to mystery. But the bookseller told me they host tons of author events. They even had a whole section of the store that was just dedicated to signed first editions. You know, I can't walk into a bookstore without buying a book. And I was in the mood for something fun, but I was debating between a thriller or a romance. So I posted a poll on my Instagram story, and it was neck and neck there for a little bit. Romance came out on top, so we picked up a book called It's Different This Time. I've been seeing this one all over my Instagram feed, and it just looks like the quintessential fall rom-com, so very excited to read this once we wrap up the bean trees. I also got some cute stickers and a little bookmark from the store. So it's not that late out, but it is pretty dark outside, so I think our excursions are done for the day. Dinner's on the way, and I think we're just gonna cozy up and try to read a little bit more of the bean trees. Good morning. I got through around 40 more pages last night, so we're about 160 pages into the book. I have to say that my favorite character so far is definitely Turtle, who is the little 3-year-old that Taylor unexpectedly picks up on her journey from Kentucky to Arizona. I can just picture her little quiet, curious personality, and she really just becomes this incredible symbol of resilience. What I love is how she's also just this catalyst for Taylor's growth. For the first time, Taylor has to think about someone else's needs, and it completely shifts how she sees the world. I'm so invested in what is going to happen to Turtle, and I'd honestly just read this book for her character alone. It is early, and I need some caffeine, so I think we're gonna head out and grab some coffee, and hopefully do a little bit more reading. Coffee has been secured. I spent about an hour reading at this cute little cafe called Andaz. It was a very popular local spot. I have about 25 pages left of The Bean Trees, and the plot is building. I don't want to give too much away, but let's just say it's very interesting that this book was written almost 40 years ago, and we are still dealing with many of the same issues. There was one quote that literally just took my breath away. So there's this point where Taylor is talking to her friend Esteban, who is a Guatemalan refugee. And there's a lot to the conversation, but at one point she says, "I can't even begin to think about a world where people have to make choices like that." And Esteban just quietly says, "You live in that world." Just the way that this author creates this humanity through dialogue is certainly one of the reasons that her writing has resonated so widely. But it also just feels so personal to think about living a relatively sheltered life, all of the issues that are just constantly going on in the world. Anyway, not to bring down the vibes, I do want to get out and see some of the desert scenery, so we're going to head over to a local park and finish up the last 25 pages or so. Okay, we've actually made it to our next date, so a little bit of a sneak peek here, but I did want to share my final thoughts on the bean trees. I have to say that I love that this challenge is inspiring me to reach for some backlist titles that I wouldn't have otherwise picked up. The Bean Trees is just one of those stories that feels timeless. The characters are definitely what made it for me. They just feel so real and relatable. The writing has a really natural flow, and though the setting isn't super specific to Arizona, it does still have that Southwest vibe. I love how the story balances heavier topics with just so much warmth and humor. It's hopeful but not overly polished and just feels really human. I struggle with the rating for this one, especially as I'm reading so many different genres. I tend to judge romance and thrillers on a little bit of a different scale than literary fiction because I read them for enjoyment and not necessarily for the content or style. So it's hard to say that I gave a romance novel 4.5 stars when this one is obviously so much more impactful. But it's just an entirely different scale in my mind. So with that in mind, I would give The Bean Trees 4.25 stars. It was a little slow to start, but I definitely got more invested as the story went on and you get to know the characters a little bit better. And Barbara Kingsolver manages to tackle such big topics with so much humanity and grace. I do know that there's a second book in this series, and I absolutely loved the Greer family, so I would certainly consider reading that. But that is all for Arizona, and now we are 5 states in, so that's 10%. I hope you're enjoying this little reading adventure series. It's been so fun for me. Thank you so much for coming along, and I will see you in the next state.